Have you ever had your boss look you dead in the eye and tell you that you're replaceable at any moment? I didn't just hear those words. I turned them into the wrecking ball that demolished his career in less than 24 hours. This is the story of how an arrogant CFO pulled the safety pin on his own company. And let me press the detonator. He thought I was just another expendable cog in his corporate machine. He was catastrophically wrong. My name is Amelia Drake, and for 6 years, I've been the Chief Legal and Compliance Officer at Vanguard Meridian Capital, one of those glass tower financial firms in Manhattan where everyone wears designer suits and pretends their third divorce isn't killing them inside. At 36, I'd built my reputation on being the person who kept us out of federal prison. Not exactly glamorous work, but essential when you're managing $8 billion of other people's money. That Monday morning started like any other. Black coffee, Bloomberg Terminal, and a stack of regulatory updates that would make most people's eyes bleed. The all-hands meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock, standard quarterly review stuff. What wasn't standard was our new CFO, Richard Hale, who'd been imported from some boutique firm in Connecticut 3 weeks earlier. Richard strutted into the conference room like he owned the building. Armani suit, silver cufflinks that probably cost more than most people's rent, and that particular brand of confidence that comes from never having been told no in his entire privileged life. He'd already made waves by canceling the coffee service on floors 3 through 7 to optimize unnecessary expenditures. The meeting was supposed to be about Q3 projections. Instead, it became Richard's personal TED Talk on trimming the fat. He clicked through slides showing department budgets, circling numbers in red like a teacher grading failed exams. When he reached the legal and compliance section, he paused. His eyes found mine across the room. "Ms. Drake," he said, letting my name hang in the air like smoke. "Remind me again, what exactly do you do here?" The room went silent. 43 pairs of eyes swiveled between us like spectators at Wimbledon. "I ensure this company maintains its federal licenses and stays compliant with—" Right, he interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. "The paperwork department, tell me, when was the last time your division actually generated revenue?" I felt my jaw tighten, but kept my expression neutral. "We prevent losses. Last quarter alone, my team identified and corrected issues that could have resulted in $12 million in regulatory fines." "Hypothetical losses," Richard countered, his smile sharp as broken glass. "I prefer dealing with real numbers. Tangible value." He turned to address the room. "This is exactly the kind of bloated thinking that's been holding us back. We have entire departments dedicated to problems that might happen, lawyers for lawsuits that don't exist, compliance officers for rules that anyone with common sense could follow." Someone coughed. Nobody laughed. Richard clicked to his next slide, a reorganization chart. My department had been reduced to a tiny box marked to be integrated with operations. Effective immediately. We're streamlining redundant positions. Some of you will be asked to take on additional responsibilities. Others, his eyes locked onto mine again, will need to prove their value to this organization. Because let me be crystal clear, everyone in this room is replaceable. Everyone. The meeting continued for another 30 minutes, but I'd stopped listening. I was too busy watching Richard, studying him the way a naturalist studies a particularly poisonous snake. He had no idea what he'd just done. No comprehension of the carefully balanced ecosystem he was about to destroy. See, people like Richard think business is just numbers on spreadsheets, bodies and seats, costs to be cut. They don't understand that some employees aren't just cogs in the machine, they are the machine. Remove them, and everything stops. As the meeting ended and people filed out, murmuring in small, nervous groups, I returned to my office and pulled up my employment contract. Section 14, Subsection 3, Paragraph 2. I'd negotiated it 6 years ago when Vanguard was desperate to get their licenses approved. Back then, they needed someone with my credentials, my spotless record, my federal clearances. They'd agreed to anything. I ran my finger along the text, smiling for the first time that morning. Richard had just lit a match in a room full of gasoline. He just didn't know it yet. The next few days would be interesting. The following weeks were a masterclass in corporate destruction disguised as efficiency. Richard moved through our offices like a tornado, leaving confusion and resentment in his wake. He started with the small things. The good coffee replaced with generic bulk buy swill. The monthly team lunches canceled. The parking validation suddenly requiring 3 signatures. Death by 1,000 cuts. Each one designed to remind us who held the knife. But it was his treatment of our compliance infrastructure that truly revealed his staggering ignorance. Why do we have 17 different approval channels for client onboarding? He demanded during a department head's meeting, waving a flowchart like it personally offended him. Federal regulation requires, I began. I didn't ask what they require, he snapped. I asked why we're doing it. Every other firm manages with half this bureaucracy. Every other firm also pays millions in fines annually, I replied evenly. We haven't had a single violation in 4 years. Luck, he dismissed. Or maybe the regulators just haven't looked closely enough. Either way, we're consolidating. He pulled up his laptop and started typing. I'm merging all compliance communications into the general admin channel. One inbox, one process. Simple. Marcus Webb, our head of trading, shifted uncomfortably. Richard, the compliance channels are separated for a reason. Chinese walls, information barriers. Outdated concepts. Richard interrupted. We're not running a Cold War intelligence agency. We're running a business. Within 72 hours, he'd dismantled communication protocols that had taken years to establish. The dedicated compliance hotline, disconnected and rerouted to general HR, the anonymous whistleblower portal, taken offline for maintenance that would never happen. When Jennifer from Risk Management asked about it, Richard's response was breathtaking in its arrogance. If everyone's doing their job correctly, we don't need whistleblowers. It just encourages troublemakers. But Richard's most telling moment came during a client dinner at Le Bernardin. I was there representing legal, watching him hold court with 3 pension fund managers controlling about $200 million in assets. The wine was flowing. Richard was in his element, regaling them with stories of his previous conquests. The problem with modern finance, he proclaimed, gesturing with his $200 glass of Burgundy, is that we've let the lawyers and accountants run the show. They've convinced everyone that rules matter more than results. One of the clients, Mrs. Davidson from the Teachers Union Fund, frowned slightly. Surely compliance is essential. After 2008 happened because people got caught, Richard said, actually winking. The trick isn't following every little rule. It's being smart enough not to need them. I watched Mrs. Davidson's expression shift from confusion to concern. She glanced at me, and I gave her the slightest shake of my head. Not here. Not now. Richard started targeting the long-term employees next. The ones who'd built this company from a 2-room office to a midtown tower. Sarah from Settlements, 22 years with the firm, suddenly found her assistant eliminated and her workload doubled. Tom in IT, who'd designed our entire trading infrastructure, was informed his department would be outsourced to a company Richard's cousin happened to own. It's nothing personal, Richard would say with that shark smile. Just business optimization. The break room conversations turned from weekend plans to exit strategies. I started noticing recruiters' business cards appearing on desks, LinkedIn profiles being quietly updated. Richard had created a culture of fear in less than a month, and he was proud of it. You see, he told me during one of our mandatory weekly one-on-ones, feet up on his desk like he was posing for a magazine cover. Already we're running leaner. Stock price is up 2%. The stock price is up because the Fed lowered interest rates, I corrected. His smile faltered for just a second. You know, Amelia, that attitude is exactly what I'm talking about. Always finding problems instead of celebrating wins. Maybe that's why legal departments never get invited to the fun parties. We get invited, I said quietly. We just know better than to attend. He laughed, but it was hollow. Performative. See, that right there? That's your problem. You think you're above it all. The untouchable compliance queen in her ivory tower. He leaned forward, and I could smell the whiskey from his liquid lunch. But here's the thing about ivory towers. They're expensive to maintain, and I'm very good at finding cheaper alternatives. He pulled out a resume from his drawer. Harvard Law, class of 2023, hungry, eager, and willing to work for half your salary. Could probably handle your job after a few weeks of training. I looked at the resume, then back at Richard. You're right, she's very impressive. He blinked, clearly not expecting that response. In fact, I continued, standing up. Why don't you bring her in? I'd be happy to show her around, explain how everything works. Richard's grin widened. I knew you'd see it my way eventually. As I walked back to my office, I thought about all the employees he'd demoralized, all the safeguards he'd eliminated, all the risks he'd dismissed. Richard thought he was playing chess while everyone else played checkers. He had no idea I'd been playing a completely different game from the start. That evening, I stayed late in my office, the Manhattan skyline glittering beyond my window like a circuit board. The cleaning crew had come and gone, leaving me alone with the ghost-quiet hum of sleeping computers and the weight of what I knew. I pulled out my employment contract again, not the standard one HR kept on file, but my personal copy with the handwritten amendments and initials in the margins. 6 years ago, Vanguard Meridian Capital was hemorrhaging money and credibility. They'd just survived an SEC investigation by the skin of their teeth, and their license to operate as a registered investment advisor was hanging by a thread. The federal regulators had given them an ultimatum: find someone with spotless credentials to serve as the designated compliance officer, or lose everything. Enter me, fresh from untangling Chase's derivatives mess, with commendations from 3 federal agencies and a reputation for being unflinchingly clean. Vanguard needed me more than I needed them, and we both knew it. That's when I negotiated Clause 14. The lawyers had barely noticed it, buried as it was in the technical appendices. It seemed like standard boilerplate about licensing requirements. But the devil, as always, was in the details. According to federal regulation, specifically Title 15, Section 78(o) of the Exchange Act, certain financial licenses could only be held by natural persons, not corporations. Vanguard's ability to trade securities, manage client funds, and operate as a fiduciary all flowed through a single Series 24 General Securities Principal License. That license had to be registered to a specific individual who met strict criteria: 10 years of experience, no regulatory violations, and active employment with the firm. That individual was me. But here's where it got interesting. Clause 14 didn't just name me as the license holder. It created an automatic trigger. The moment my employment ended or my system access was revoked, the license would enter suspended pending review status. Not terminated, not transferred, suspended. The firm could apply for a new designated principal, but the approval process took 10 to 14 business days minimum. During that time, Vanguard couldn't execute trades, couldn't move client funds, couldn't even process redemptions. They'd be a financial institution that couldn't touch money. A casino where all the slot machines were unplugged. I pulled up our client list on my monitor. The Firefighters Pension Fund, $400 million under management. The State Teachers Retirement System, $1.2 billion. 3 pharmaceutical companies parking cash reserves, another $800 million. All of it would be frozen the instant my Access card stopped working. The beautiful irony was that Richard, in his crusade against redundancy, had eliminated everyone who might have caught this. The previous CFO would have known. The old head of compliance would have spotted it immediately. But Richard had pushed them all out, surrounded himself with yes-men and fresh graduates who wouldn't dare question him. I opened my desk drawer and looked at the slip of paper inside. The job offer from Whitmore and Associates, a competing firm that had been courting me for months. They'd offered a 30% raise and a signing bonus that would pay off my mortgage. I'd been planning to turn them down. I liked Vanguard, or at least I had before Richard arrived. But sometimes the universe hands you a gift wrapped in barbed wire. I thought about Sarah crying in the bathroom after Richard eliminated her assistant, Tom packing up 2 decades of personal items into a cardboard box, the 43 faces in that conference room when Richard called us all replaceable. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus Webb. Heard Richard's scheduling individual meetings with legal team tomorrow. Watch your back. I texted back, thanks for the heads up. Then I opened a new email to my personal attorney, Caroline Frost. She specialized in employment law and had a reputation for being utterly ruthless when it came to protecting her clients' interests. Carolyn, please review the attached contract, specifically Clause 14, Subsection 3, Paragraph 2. I may need you to remind Vanguard of their obligations if my employment status changes. Standard retainer terms apply. I attached a scan of my contract and hit send. Next, I pulled up the federal licensing database and took screenshots of everything: my license status, the firm's registrations, the dependency chains that linked them together. I forwarded it all to my personal email with the subject line, Personal Records Backup. The last thing I did was review Vanguard's business continuity plan, the one I'd written 3 years ago. Section 7. Critical Personnel Dependencies. My name appeared exactly once, in a footnote on page 47. Richard had probably never read past page 5. I locked my office and headed for the elevator. In the lobby, I passed Richard's Maserati in the executive parking section, its vanity plate reading Earner 1. He'd parked it across 2 spaces, of course. As I waited for my Uber, I thought about the Harvard grad's resume he'd shown me. She really was impressive. Law review, internship at the SEC, all the right credentials. In a few years, she could probably do my job. But she couldn't do it in a few weeks. And more importantly, she couldn't hold that license. Not without the approval process, not without the background checks, not without the time Richard didn't know he was about to lose. My driver pulled up, and as we merged into traffic, I got another text from Marcus. Richard just sent out calendar invites. You're scheduled for 2 p.m. tomorrow. Subject line, Organizational Restructuring Discussion. I smiled in the darkness of the back seat. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., Richard Hale was going to learn the difference between being replaceable and being irreplaceable. He was going to learn it the hard way. Tuesday, 2 p.m. Richard's office smelled like leather and ego, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of lesser buildings below. He'd redecorated since arriving, removed his predecessor's family photos and industry awards, replaced them with framed magazine covers featuring himself and a display case of luxury watches. The HR representative, Diana, sat in the corner with her laptop, trying to make herself invisible. Amelia. Richard said, not looking up from his monitor. Have a seat. I sat down across from his massive desk, noting the termination paperwork already printed and waiting beside his Mont Blanc pen. I'll make this quick, he continued, finally gracing me with eye contact. Your position is being eliminated. We're outsourcing compliance to Steinberg Consulting. They'll handle everything at 40% of what we're currently spending on your department. I see, I said calmly. And when was this decided? Does it matter? He leaned back in his chair. Look, I know this is hard to hear, but you had to see this coming. Your whole department is just expensive overhead. Steinberg has a team of 20 consultants who can rotate through as needed. Much more efficient than keeping full-time staff for hypothetical problems. Diana shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Hale, shouldn't we discuss the transition period? Ms. Drake has been here for 6 years. Yes, I'm aware. Richard interrupted. Which is why we're offering a generous severance package. He slid a document across the desk. 2 weeks' pay, continuation of health benefits through the end of the month. Sign this, and we can all move on with our lives. I picked up the document, pretending to read it while actually savoring the moment. 2 weeks severance for 6 years of service. He wasn't just insulting me, he was doing it cheaply. There's no mention of my accrued vacation time, I noted. Richard's eye twitched. You can take that up with payroll. And my parking spot? Will be reassigned immediately. My company phone. Please leave it with Diana on your way out. I set the document down unsigned. I need to review this with my attorney first. Your attorney? Richard laughed, a sharp bark of contempt. Amelia, you're a lawyer. What could another lawyer possibly tell you that you don't already know? This is standard termination paperwork. Nevertheless, his face flushed red. Fine. But I need your answer by end of business today. This offer expires at 5 p.m. Actually, I said, pulling out my own set of papers. I'd prefer to make this cleaner. I'll resign, effective immediately. Richard blinked, clearly not expecting this. Diana looked up from her laptop. You're resigning? Richard repeated slowly, as if the word was foreign to him. Yes, here's my letter of resignation. I placed it on his desk. I hereby resign from my position as Chief Legal and Compliance Officer of Vanguard Meridian Capital, effective immediately upon termination of my system access. Richard grabbed the letter like a starving man grabbing bread. Well, this is unexpected, but certainly makes things simpler. He was actually smiling now. Diana, process this immediately. Disable all access, parking, building entry, everything. Mr. Hale, Diana said carefully. Shouldn't we arrange for knowledge transfer? Ms. Drake handles several critical. Steinberg's team starts Monday. Richard cut her off. I'm sure they can figure it out. That's why we're paying them. He turned back to me. You can pack your office now. Security will escort you out within the hour. No need, I said, standing up. I already cleared my personal items last night. Richard's grin widened. Even better. Diana, make sure her access is terminated immediately. I don't want her logging into anything after she leaves this room. Diana typed rapidly on her laptop. All access will be revoked as of 12:01 p.m. She looked at her watch. That's in exactly 7 minutes. Perfect, Richard said. He stood and extended his hand mockingly. No hard feelings, Amelia. You're just not the right fit for where this company's heading. I'm sure you'll land on your feet. People like you always do. I looked at his extended hand but didn't take it. People like me? You know, rule followers, box checkers, the types who think business is about following every little regulation instead of making money. He lowered his hand, unbothered by the snub. The real world is going to be quite a shock for you. I glanced at my watch. 11:58 a.m. Richard, I said quietly, can I ask you something? Make it quick. Did you ever actually read my employment contract? He waved dismissively. I had my team summarize the relevant points, standard stuff, non-compete, non-disclosure, the usual. What about the appendices? The what? 11:59 a.m. The technical appendices, specifically the ones dealing with federal licensing requirements. His smile faltered slightly. What about them? 12 p.m. Never mind, I said, heading for the door. You'll figure it out. Amelia, he called after me, irritation creeping into his voice. What are you talking about? I paused at the doorway. Diana's laptop chimed. Access termination complete, Diana announced. Ms. Drake's credentials have been fully revoked as of 12:01 p.m. Excellent, Richard said, but he was still frowning at me. Amelia, if there's something I should know, you said it yourself, Richard. I'm replaceable. You've got Steinberg starting Monday. I'm sure everything will be fine. I walked out of his office, past the executive assistants who'd gone silent, past the break room where 3 analysts were whispering urgently, past my former office with its empty desk and dark monitor. In the elevator, my phone buzzed. Caroline Frost. Just reviewed your contract. Clause 14 is ironclad. The firm has approximately 15 minutes before their first automated compliance check fails. Should I prepare the formal notification? I typed back, give it an hour. Let them figure it out themselves first. As I walked through the lobby for the last time, I could already imagine the chaos about to unfold 30 floors above. The first sign would be small, a routine trade failing to execute, then another. Then the alerts would start cascading, system after system recognizing that the compliance officer of record was no longer authenticated. By the time Richard understood what had happened, it would be far too late. The security guard at the front desk nodded at me. "Have a good day, Ms. Drake." "You too, William," I replied. "You might want to avoid the executive floor for the next few hours." He raised an eyebrow but said nothing. As I stepped onto the street, into the bright afternoon sun, I felt my phone buzz again. Marcus Webb. The trading platform just locked everyone out. What the hell is happening? I didn't reply. Richard wanted to run lean and efficient. He was about to learn what happened when you cut out the heart of the machine. The real world, as he'd put it, was about to be quite a shock indeed. By 12:15 p.m., I was sitting in a cafe 2 blocks away, watching my former colleagues' increasingly frantic texts light up my phone like a Christmas tree. I ordered a cappuccino and a sandwich I had no intention of eating, just to have an excuse to occupy the corner table with a view of Vanguard's building. Marcus Webb. Trading platform is completely frozen, can't execute any orders. Jennifer Liu, risk management. All compliance approvals are failing. System says invalid authorizer credentials. Tom Mitchell, IT. Whatever happened at 12:01 just triggered a cascade failure. Everything tied to compliance verification is locked. I sipped my coffee and pulled up the Federal Financial Institutions database on my phone. There it was, updated in real time. Vanguard Meridian Capital, Series 24 Principal License Status, suspended, awaiting designation of qualified individual. The beauty of federal financial regulations is their inflexibility. There's no override button, no emergency workaround. When a licensed principal's access is terminated, the system treats it like that person died or was indicted. Immediate suspension of all regulated activities until a replacement is properly vetted and approved. My phone rang. Diana from HR. "Amelia," she said, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "We need you to come back to the office immediately." "I'm sorry, Diana, but I no longer work there." Mr. Hale was very clear about that. There's been a misunderstanding. Mr. Hale wants to discuss a consulting arrangement. I don't think that's possible. As Richard explained, Steinberg Consulting is handling compliance now. There was muffled shouting in the background. I heard Richard's voice, sharp and angry. "Tell her to get back here now." "Amelia." Diana tried again. "Please. The trading desk can't execute client orders. We have 300 million in trades pending that can't be processed." "That sounds like a Steinberg problem," I said pleasantly. "They start Monday, right?" More shouting. Then Richard's voice came on the line, trying to sound calm and failing spectacularly. "Amelia, we need to discuss your transition out of the firm more thoughtfully." "We already did. You were quite thorough. Look, there seems to be some technical glitch related to your access termination. If you could just come back and help us sort it out." "Richard," I interrupted. "Did you know that federal law requires a Series 24 licensed principal to be actively employed and system authenticated for a firm to execute trades?" Silence. "Did you know," I continued, "that when Vanguard brought me on 6 years ago, they registered me as their sole designated principal because I was the only one who met the qualifications after their last compliance crisis? That can't be right." Richard stammered. "We have other licensed professionals. Series 7, Series 63, yes. But not Series 24 with principal designation. That was centralized to me to, as your predecessor put it, ensure consistent compliance oversight. Then we'll just designate someone else. Absolutely. The application is only 40 pages. Plus, fingerprinting, background checks, review of the past 10 years of professional history. The fast-track approval takes 10 business days. 14 if there are any questions." I could practically hear his blood pressure rising through the phone. The Pension Fund Advisory Board is calling an emergency meeting, he said, his voice now openly desperate. They can't access their funds. They're threatening to pull everything. All 400 million? Yes, and if they pull out, the others will follow. We'll lose 2 billion in assets under management by end of day. I took another sip of coffee. That does sound serious. Amelia, please. What do you want? Your job back? A raise? Name it. Richard, you terminated me. You had security ready to escort me out. You gave me 2 weeks severance for 6 years of service. You called me replaceable. I was hasty. We can work something out. My phone buzzed with another text. This one was from James Patterson, the CEO. Amelia, please call me directly. Whatever Richard did, we'll fix it. Then another from David Kim, head of trading. We're hemorrhaging money. Clients trying to exit positions as market drops, can't execute, down 50 manather, and climbing. Richard, I said, I need to go. My attorney is calling on the other line. Your attorney? Why do you need? I hung up and switched to Caroline Frost's incoming call. Amelia, Caroline said, her voice full of professional satisfaction. I've been monitoring the situation. Vanguard's general counsel just called me in a complete panic. They're offering to reinstate you immediately with a 50% raise and a written apology from Mr. Hale. Not interested. Good. Because what they're experiencing right now, it's going to get much worse. I just checked. 3 of their institutional clients have already filed formal complaints with FINRA about being unable to access their funds. By market close, Vanguard will be facing regulatory investigations. I watched as 2 black town cars pulled up to Vanguard's building. Men and women in dark suits climbed out, carrying briefcases, federal regulators. They'd moved even faster than I'd expected. The SEC doesn't play around with firms that can't execute client instructions, Carolyn continued, especially when those clients include pension funds and retirement accounts. My phone was now receiving texts every few seconds. Emergency all hands meeting in 5 minutes. Board of directors arriving. Local news van just pulled up outside. Client threatening lawsuit on Twitter. Trading desk in full revolt. The last one was from Marcus. Richard just threw his laptop against the wall. Never seen a human being turn that color before. I flagged down the waiter for my check. As I was paying, my phone rang again. The caller ID showed Vanguard Board of Directors. I let it go to voicemail. The entire machine had ground to a halt, just as I'd known it would. Every trade blocked, every transaction frozen, every client payment suspended. All because Richard Hale thought everyone was replaceable. He'd pulled out what he thought was just another cog. He'd actually pulled out the key that kept the engine running, and now, 30 floors above, he was watching his career dissolve in real time, one failed transaction at a time. By 3 p.m., Vanguard Meridian Capital had become a 21st century financial zombie, moving, talking, but unable to perform any actual functions. I'd relocated to the Starbucks across the street, where I had a perfect view of the chaos. The news vans had multiplied from 1 to 4. A reporter was already doing a stand-up with the building in the background. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing. I'd switched it to silent after the 30th call. The text messages kept coming, though, painting a picture of escalating catastrophe. Sarah, settlements. Can't process any withdrawals. Clients going ballistic. Anonymous number. Richard claiming this is cyber terrorism. Wants to call FBI. Marcus. Board member just asked Richard point blank if he read your contract before firing you. Dead silence. At 3:47 p.m., Richard himself appeared in the lobby's glass entrance, gesticulating wildly at someone on his phone. Even from across the street, I could see his face was the color of an overripe tomato. He ended the call and immediately started another, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. Then came the text I'd been waiting for. From James Patterson. CEO. Amelia. The board has asked me to reach out personally. Please call me. Richard has been removed from the termination decision. This is now between you and the board directly. I called him back. Amelia. James said immediately. Thank God. Listen. We've just discovered what Richard did. The board had no knowledge of your termination. This was completely unauthorized. Unauthorized, he said it was approved at the highest levels. He lied. James's voice was flat. He never brought it to us. Never mentioned the compliance structure. We found out about Clause 14 20 minutes ago when legal finally reached page 47 of your contract addendum. I see. The firm is paralyzed. We've had to notify the exchange that we can't fulfill orders. The SEC has sent an emergency audit team. 3 pension funds are threatening to terminate their contracts. We're looking at hundreds of millions in losses and potential regulatory fines that could destroy us. That's unfortunate. Amelia, I'm going to be direct. What will it take to get you back? Name your terms. James, I resigned. Richard made it very clear I wasn't the right fit for the company's direction. Richard is an idiot who's about to be unemployed. Forget Richard. What do you want? I watched Richard through the window, now slumped on a lobby bench with his head in his hands. I want a public acknowledgement that Richard acted without board authority. I want my full team reinstated. Everyone he fired or forced out. Sarah gets her assistant back. Tom's outsourcing is canceled. Done. I want 3 years of salary as a retention bonus, paid immediately. Agreed. And I want Richard's office. There was a pause. He's actually still in the building. Then he should probably start packing. Anything else? Yes, I wanted in writing that any future changes to my position must be approved unanimously by the board, with 60 days' notice. I'll have legal draft it immediately. My attorney will review it first. Of course, Amelia. How quickly can you restore access? As soon as I'm officially reinstated and logged back into the system, the licenses reactivate automatically. 15 minutes, maybe 20. Thank God. Can you come back now? I'll be there in an hour. I want everything signed before I enter the building. Understood. And Amelia, Richard wants to apologize personally. I laughed. I'm sure he does. At 4:15 p.m., I received an encrypted email from Caroline with the signed agreements, everything I'd asked for, plus a written apology from the board for the unilateral and ill-considered actions of Mr. Hale, who acted beyond his authority and without proper consideration of regulatory requirements. At 4:30 p.m., as I was preparing to head back, I got one final text from Marcus. Richard just got escorted to his office by security to pack his things. He has 30 minutes. Nobody's even pretending to be sad. I finished my coffee and stood up. Through the window, I could see federal regulators loading boxes into their vehicles, evidence for the investigation that would follow. The news vans were still there. Reporters sensing blood in the water. Richard had called me replaceable. He'd said I was just expensive overhead, that a new graduate could do my job after a week of training. He'd dismantled safeguards, ignored warnings, and believed his MBA and narcissism made him invincible. Now his career was radioactive. No financial firm would touch someone who'd caused a complete operational shutdown and regulatory investigation through sheer arrogance. He'd gone from master of the universe to untouchable in less than 4 hours. I walked back toward the building, my phone buzzing with messages from headhunters who'd already heard about the disaster. The financial world is small, and news travels fast. By tomorrow, everyone would know what Richard had done. But more importantly, they'd know what happened when you treated critical people as disposable. The security guard, William, smiled as I approached. Welcome back, Ms. Drake. Heard you're getting the corner office. News travels fast. Mr. Hale just left through the parking garage. Looked like he'd seen a ghost. He probably had. The ghost of his career. William laughed and waved me through. As the elevator climbed to the executive floor, I thought about Richard's Maserati with its Earner 1 license plate. I wondered if he'd have to sell it. The elevator dinged at my floor, the executive floor now, and I stepped out to find the entire leadership team waiting. James Patterson stepped forward, looking like he'd aged 5 years in 5 hours. Amelia, thank you for coming back. Let's get me logged in, I said, You've got about 370 million in pending trades to execute before market close. As we walked toward what used to be Richard's office, I passed the conference room where this had all started, where Richard had stood in his expensive suit and called us all replaceable. Turns out he was right about one thing. Someone in that room had been replaceable. It just wasn't me. The emergency board meeting convened at 5:30 p.m. in the 42nd floor conference room, the one reserved for quarterly earnings calls and crisis management. I sat at the far end of the table, having just restored system access 20 minutes earlier. The trading desk had executed $370 million in delayed transactions in record time, barely making the market close. Board Chairman Walter Brennan, 73 years old with the demeanor of a hanging judge, opened the folder in front of him. The other 11 board members sat in silence, their faces ranging from furious to shell-shocked. "Ladies and gentlemen," Walter began, his voice carrying the weight of barely controlled rage. "We are here to discuss the catastrophic failure of judgment that occurred today. Ms. Drake, would you please explain to the board exactly what Clause 14 entails?" I stood, pulling up the relevant documents on the conference room screen. Clause 14, subsection 3, paragraph 2 of my employment agreement ties my personal Series 24 principal license to Vanguard's operational capacity. When the firm hired me 6 years ago, following your previous compliance crisis, I was registered as the sole designated principal. This was done to centralize compliance authority and satisfy federal regulators. "And when your employment terminates," asked Patricia Morse, head of the risk committee, "the firm's trading licenses automatically suspend pending designation of a new qualified principal. The approval process takes 10 to 14 business days minimum." "Which Mr. Hale would have known if he'd read past page 5 of your contract," Walter said, holding up the document. "Or consulted legal, or asked anyone who'd been here longer than a month." The door opened, and Richard walked in, flanked by 2 security guards. His Armani suit was wrinkled, his perfect hair disheveled. The arrogance had been replaced by something between desperation and disbelief. "Sit," Walter commanded, pointing to a chair positioned apart from the table, like a defendant's dock. Richard sat. "Mr. Hale," Walter continued, "do you understand what you've done?" "I was optimizing operational costs." "Stop." Walter's voice cut through the air. "You paralyzed a multi-billion-dollar investment firm. You triggered an SEC investigation. You caused a liquidity crisis that nearly destroyed our relationships with 3 major pension funds. You did this without board approval, without legal review, without even reading the contracts of the people you terminated. I had authority over personnel decisions. Your authority," Patricia interrupted, "explicitly requires board notification for any C-suite changes. It's in your contract, Mr. Hale." Page 12. Richard's mouth opened, then closed. Walter pulled out another document. The SEC's preliminary report. They're considering charges of gross negligence and violation of fiduciary duty. Our insurance company has already indicated they may not cover losses stemming from willful disregard of documented regulatory requirements. "That's not—" "I didn't willfully—" "You dismissed our chief compliance officer without understanding her role," board member David Chen said coldly. "You told her, and I quote from the recording, 'I'm sure everything will be fine.' That's textbook negligence." "Recording?" Richard's face went pale. "All termination meetings are recorded," I said quietly. "It's in the employee handbook, page 137. Walter stood, his full height making him tower over the seated Richard. "Mr. Hale, let me explain what happens next. You're terminated, effective immediately, for cause, no severance, no benefits. Your bonus is forfeit. You'll be personally named in any lawsuits arising from today's events. You can't, additionally," Walter continued, "we'll be reporting your actions to FINRA. Your licenses will likely be suspended. Your reputation in finance is over." Richard turned to me, his eyes wild. "This is your fault. You knew this would happen and didn't warn me. I asked if you'd read my contract. I replied evenly. You said your team had summarized the relevant points. You set me up." No, Mr. Hale, you set yourself up. I just didn't stop you. Walter gestured to the security guards. Please escort Mr. Hale from the building. His personal items will be shipped to his home address. As Richard was led out, he turned back one last time. You're all making a mistake. I was fixing this place, making it profitable. We were already profitable, Walter said tiredly. We've been profitable for 15 years. You just couldn't see it through your ego. The door closed behind Richard with a decisive click. Walter turned to me. Ms. Drake, the board owes you an apology. We should have protected our employees better. We should have verified Richard's decisions. We failed in our oversight. What's done is done, I said. Let's focus on moving forward. Agreed. Your new office is ready. Your team will be fully reinstated by tomorrow morning. Is there anything else you need? I thought for a moment. Yes. I want to establish a new protocol. Any executive who wants to make personnel changes must first complete a compliance impact assessment, no exceptions. Draft it. We'll vote it into policy immediately. As the board members filed out, Patricia stopped beside me. You could have warned him, prevented all of this. I could have, I admitted. But he wouldn't have listened. People like Richard only learn through consequences. And if the firm had collapsed? It wouldn't have. I was monitoring the situation the entire time. If it had gotten truly dangerous, I would have intervened, but Richard needed to fail completely, publicly, and undeniably. Otherwise, he'd have found someone else to blame. Patricia studied me for a moment, then smiled. Remind me never to underestimate you, Ms. Drake. As I walked to my new office, Richard's former office, I passed the wall of awards and recognition the firm had earned over the years. Tomorrow, there would likely be headlines about today's chaos, but within a week, it would be forgotten. Just another cautionary tale about executive hubris. Richard, however, would never forget. Every job interview, every background check, every Google search of his name would bring up this day. The day he learned that in the complex machinery of high finance, some cogs are absolutely irreplaceable, and some executives are all too replaceable indeed. The Wall Street Journal ran the story 3 days later. Vanguard Meridian CFO terminated after compliance crisis freezes $2 billion in assets. The article was clinical, factual, and absolutely devastating. Richard Hale's name appeared 17 times, each mention another nail in his professional coffin. I read it from my new corner office, the one with the view of the Hudson River and the custom mahogany desk Richard had imported from Italy. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd never wanted his office, never cared about executive trappings. But sometimes justice comes with premium real estate. My phone buzzed. Sarah from Settlements. Team lunch at noon. Tom's buying to celebrate getting his department back. I smiled and confirmed. The atmosphere at Vanguard had transformed completely in 72 hours. The fear was gone, replaced by something almost foreign in corporate America. Genuine gratitude. That afternoon, Walter Brennan stopped by with a copy of the Financial Times. Page 3, he said, placing it on my desk. The headline read, Richard Hale under federal investigation for regulatory violations. The subheading was even better. Former CFO's license suspended, pending review. The SEC works fast, I observed. They do when someone causes a systemic failure through pure arrogance. Walter replied, Oh, and you should know, Steinberg Consulting called to withdraw their proposal. Apparently, they don't want to be associated with this mess. Shocking. Walter sat down across from me, his expression turning serious. Amelia, I need you to know something. In 40 years of serving on boards, I've never seen someone handle a crisis with such precision. You could have let us burn. That was never the goal. The goal was accountability. Still, most people would have just sued us. Lawsuits take years. Richard needed to face consequences immediately, publicly, and irreversibly. Besides, I added, I like this company. I just didn't like what he was turning it into. Walter stood to leave, then paused at the door. By the way, Richard's cousin's outsourcing company? They're also under investigation. Turns out they weren't properly licensed either. After he left, I turned back to my computer. 23 emails from headhunters trying to poach me. 12 interview requests from financial publications. 3 speaking invitations from compliance conferences. I deleted them all. At 4 p.m., Marcus Webb knocked on my door. Got a minute? Always. He came in carrying 2 cups of coffee, the good stuff, not the bulk swill Richard had mandated. I wanted to thank you, not just for coming back, but for how you handled everything. You could have warned us what would happen. Would you have believed me if I'd said Richard's decision would shut down the entire firm? Marcus considered this. Probably not. We'd have thought you were being dramatic. Exactly. Sometimes people need to see the explosion to understand the bomb was real. He raised his coffee cup. To irreplaceable cogs in the machine. To knowing your worth, I countered. We clinked cups. That evening, as I was leaving the office, I saw a familiar Maserati in the visitors' parking area. Richard was sitting in his car, staring up at the building. For a moment, our eyes met through the glass doors. He looked hollow, defeated, like a king surveying a kingdom he'd lost through his own hubris. Security noticed him too. Within minutes, he was gone. The Earner 1 license plate disappearing into New York traffic for the last time. I took the subway home, same as always. My phone had one final message from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, then noticed it was from the Harvard grad whose resume Richard had waved at me. Ms. Drake, I wanted to reach out and thank you. I was offered a position at Vanguard by Mr. Hale. But after researching what happened, I understand you saved me from a catastrophic career mistake. I'm accepting an offer elsewhere, somewhere that values compliance and ethics. I hope to be like you one day. I smiled and put my phone away. Outside the subway window, Manhattan rushed by in a blur of lights and ambition. Richard had been right about one thing. Everyone is replaceable. But he'd failed to understand the critical qualifier, everyone is replaceable eventually. Try to replace someone immediately, without understanding their role, without respecting their contribution, without even reading their contract. That's not leadership. That's arrogance. And arrogance, as Richard learned, has a price. His career had imploded in less than 24 hours. From corner office to industry pariah in the time it takes most people to process an expense report, he thought he was the smartest person in the room, the cost-cutting genius who would revolutionize our firm. Instead, he became a cautionary tale told in business schools and compliance seminars, the executive who was so focused on cutting costs that he cut his own throat. As for me, I went back to work the next day. And the day after that. Same job, better office, same commitment to keeping the machine running smoothly. Because that's what irreplaceable people do. We show up, we do the work, and we remember that respect is earned, not demanded. Richard Hale thought everyone was replaceable. He was right. He just never realized he was talking about himself. Thank you so much for listening to this story of corporate karma and sweet revenge. I'm curious. Where are you listening to this tale of office justice from? Are you on your commute, taking a break at work, or perhaps lying in bed enjoying some late-night revenge stories? Drop a comment below and let me know. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of people getting exactly what they deserve, and share your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed a boss's arrogance backfire spectacularly? I'd love to hear your experiences.